So Lisa, I shared with you yesterday that at Essence, we have a tradition of sharing a quirky fact about ourselves when we welcome new people to the company. So to kick us off, I would love to hear your quirky fact.
And I actually deliberated probably over this question, probably more than any other question. So what's interesting is that, especially becoming a CMO, this was not my original even field of choice when I had started. Actually, when I had started, I was much younger. I was getting a doctorate in clinical psychology, thinking I was going to be a clinical therapist with a specialty in Eastern philosophy and Western psych. This is like pre-yoga and pre-wellness boom, but certainly my roots were kind of there. And I loved the work. I loved the what was driving motivation, but I certainly craved people. When you're sitting one-on-one and you're sitting with clients, it can be overall kind of an isolating experience, which is, actually triggered some memories with the pandemic. But yeah, so it wasn't, until later that I said, I love thinking about what motivates people, what their story is, what the narrative is. And then it really kind of transitioned out from therapy and psychology into brand development, marketing from there. And I've been in the field since.
That's awesome. I really love learning like what people studied in school and what their passions are. And lately have even been having conversations with people about what we all thought we would do when we were 5 years old. And we've come a long way, and even since college. So that's a really fascinating story about your personal trajectory, which is a great segue to my next question, because I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your career journey and obviously making a huge transition along the way, as you just articulated. But tell me, maybe in more recent years about your path to Casper and your current role as CMO.
Well, I mean, I think it's funny. People were, when I made the shift to Casper, I think there was a little bit of surprise, but for me, it was a really intuitive evolution. Coming from a perspective of always kind of generating a level of authentic connection with people. I'd always been a part of brands, even though in a different segment, that were either originators, inventors, or really had an authentic place in their area. So Levi's, Ralph Lauren, Lacoste, I mean, literally these were the companies that invented the product or invented the category or invented the experience. So, Levi's by default invented the blue jean. Lacoste, Rene Lacoste actually invented the polo as well as the ball machine. He was truly an inventor. And Ralph Lauren really invented the way that we shopped a lifestyle and we experienced a lifestyle. And so having admired, I admired Casper in that way because they had a brand and they had invented and reinvented this experience, but that inventor mentality and that inventor status was something that was always meaningful to me from day one and actually drove a lot of my choices. I think the other reason was all these other brands generate a high level of meaningful cultural relevance. The conversation, whether they're values driven or, as I said, lifestyles driven, these are brands that have been part of cultural lexicon. They're part of the fabric of our lives, literally. And I saw that even in such a young company with Casper. It had such a level of cultural relevance. And now that I've been here for a little bit of time, see how that translates to conversation and how the brand is so primary in that. And then, honestly, the last piece was kind of a personal piece, an anecdote. I had never owned a weighted blanket. I know this sounds crazy, but I wasn't familiar with the category. I wasn't familiar with the product. It kind of seemed kind of foreign to me. And then my niece asked for one for Christmas. And so I had, asked her, why she was interested in it. And since she said it was something that she just thought would help her relax. And so I have a 6-year-old and she was having a lot of trouble going to sleep. And so I bought her a Dusty Rose weighted blanket and I put her to bed and she started to sleep through the night. And when I made our bedtime better, I made my morning better. And so I really started to kind of see all of these, the benefits and the use case. But certainly it has been a far more natural evolution than it might seem from afar.
No, and I love hearing your personal connection, especially with your daughter too, because I'm a mom to a toddler right now. And one of the things that you learn with a newborn is that they really recommend like weighted sleep sacks
Yeah,
to, help the child feel comfortable in their sleep space. So, having a child, it's an entirely new sleep learning system to learn how to coach someone else into that restful state.
absolutely. And it's also kind of humorous, have you see your child drag their blanket from one room to the other, to see my 6-year-old try and just drag her weighted blanket from the bedroom into the living room at night. So it's actually also just a fun thing to watch them try and maneuver around.
Yeah, part of their routine too.
Exactly.
Well, your daughter is 6
Yeah.
and Casper is 6, about to turn 7
Yes.
month, big birthday coming up. So you talked about innovation and, the history of iconic brands like Lacoste and Ralph Lauren. Casper still being a relatively young company. Talk to me a bit about, from your perspective, the evolution of the brand, which began before your time there as CMO, and kind of where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because, again, I think the brand put a huge stake in the ground when it launched, right? And it was addressing a very, very direct need in a very very simple, very, very clear way. The one perfect mattress. It also kind of popped up around the time that the DTC explosion had happened. And so I think that there's a lot of elements of that that are incredibly important to the foundation for our evolution, because as take a few years ahead of time, it's also kind of amazing what the brand has achieved in such a short time. When you think about, we talk about some of our category, and we're talking about brands that have been there 20, 30, 40 years. And Casper is part of the conversation. It's only been in April, it'll be 7 years old. But that evolution has gone from being kind of a single product, single proposition, to building on a wider distribution wider distribution of places to shop, but also a broader set of products that are far more geared to individual sleepers and individual sleep needs. So while I see this kind of evolution to broadening, I think it's still based on our core mission, which we are very, very connected to. It comes up in so many of our conversations of awakening the power of a well-rested world and what that means. And so we continue to build upon that. And so that's kind of a continuation of our original story. And I think today what we're still doing is looking at how do we provide the best sleep experiences. We're not talking about a mattress anymore. We're talking about your holistic. This is your holistic life. It's your children. It's your environment. It's your world, and it impacts how you perform and how you feel. And I think we are really far more engaged and connected to that aspect of our brand and the important role that we play to help people feel better every day.
I love that. It's, sleep as an industry is just clearly a bigger thing than we realized. And I'm just curious, building on that, when Casper began, did they realize that the mission would evolve from a single product and their focus in mattresses? Was it always a bigger vision to address sleep holistically?
Yes. I mean, from day one, I think the vision has always been there. And so this is just the evolution of that vision. In talking with our CEO, when he's like, imagine if the world was well rested, and I got chills, because you really start to see kind of the impact of this mission. Obviously there's been, a huge boom, a lot of copycats in this area, but from the beginning, Casper has always been very, very connected to their path to improving the lives of people through sleep. I mean, it's always been part of the core identity of the company, for sure.
No, that's fantastic. And you mentioned, a lot of copycats. Casper really revolutionized the sleep industry with the bed in the box, and its innovation obviously inspired a lot of new entrants to come in and do the same thing. But as a company, you're rooted in disruption because you did something different in the category that no one else was doing. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how do you maintain that momentum? And for a brand born in disruption, how do you challenge and inspire your team to keep innovating and to kind of keep up that pulse of challenging the market?
I mean, it's, I think this just the disruptor badge is a positive and a negative, because I think people just look at one type of disruption and think that's the only thing that you're disrupting. We did disrupt, and I think the woman who I saw before, we did disrupt the industry and we disrupted an experience. And I think we're still innovating in those areas, especially in results, to the pandemic, of how we're reaching consumers and how they're shopping and virtual appointments and how we're connecting with them. So I do see that this consistency of disruption and innovation is something, yes, we became kind of famous for, but certainly it certainly continues. That said, product, whether it's been a single mattress or the best mattresses for you, and the experience, these were always rooted in human-centered design, human-centered thought. And so even though it was kind of packaged as disruption, what the company has always been about, and this is what I do think we still continue to do, is create those human experiences. If you shop our stores, there, you can close the curtains, you can rest on the product. You have a very human experience, and our product, the rigor with which our products are developed, it's always, it's rooted in testing. It's rooted in how will a person react to this? And so everything goes through a level of now research to make sure it still kind of has that best in class badge. And so, yes, we were kind of the disruptors, but that really came from a very human place. And that human place is what continues to drive our continual innovation and our continual product excellence. So in that sense, I think we've always been disrupting and we always will disrupt. It's interesting when you mentioned the teams virtually. I started at Casper in the pandemic. I have a large team. I've probably only met 3 of them in person. And we've spent, I'd say, the first 3 to 4 months of my time, it was a lot of time dedicated to how do we develop a connection? How do we develop a sense of trust, right? Because you want to be in an environment where if you are, a lot of the times, if you're trying to do something different, you have to share new ideas with people that you may not know or be comfortable with. And then how do we really get to know each other? So I started with, there's something called the PPPFM, which I was trying to understand from them, who are their people? What's their progress? What are their priorities? What are their fires? And then tell me something about you. And so every single week, I would literally read every single one of these. So I had a chance to, if someone was leaning in, week after week on some of the me elements, I could really tap in and say something's going on with them. Or if it was all about, their progress and how they're crushing it at work, I could open up the dialogue and say, so where are you in the world? What are you doing right now? And so it allowed this foundation of connection with the team, then allowed us to be far more prepared and reactive when things started to become so dynamic in the market, that we feel we had a cohesion that was a real, I guess, blessing for us during the fact that we thought this would be a couple weeks, and it's been over a year now. So yeah, that's definitely how we're still doing these things. We still do what's trending, and we still do meetings where it's just all about what are we seeing, feeling, thinking, what's our, data showing us, what should we be paying attention to, just so we're just kind of constantly in a position to react or drive.
It makes a lot of sense that a brand that's really focused on a very human experience would take the same approach with its employees, just in interactions. And I think we've all experienced how strange that is to get to know new team members, and we're all in different places in the world. I completely agree. One of the probably most frequently asked questions with new people is, so where in the world are you? Because some of us aren't in the place that we were a year ago. And we learn about each other in different ways too, and say like, oh, are you in a different room of your house today? Like
Yeah.
seeing the insides of people's homes, meeting their kids and their dogs. It's definitely a different way of getting to know each other. But in some respects, it's also a more intimate way of getting to know your team members, because you see a different side than you might otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, pretty much every person on my team knows my daughter, knows Isla, knows when it's her birthday, knows when I have a school appointment. We're very open, and I think it's in some ways been probably more beneficial than if we were in the office, where there would never be that reason. And now we have all these reasons, more reasons to connect, and it's just actually in some respects made us a lot stronger as a team.
That's great to hear. So we started to touch on, the challenges of the pandemic and talking about trends more broadly. The theme for this Brand Innovators Summit is TrendWatch. So I have to ask, with the sleep industry in particular, what trends are you watching? And if you could put some of those in the context of the pandemic, we've already discussed the importance of being well rested and how our well rested selves are our best selves, but is everybody just losing sleep in the past year, and can we do anything about it?
So obviously, sleep wellness has been a topic of conversation for a while now. And I think, like most trends, sleep related or non-sleep related, the pandemic accelerated these trends. And I don't think sleep is any different. Certainly, this is a widely known statistic, but about 35% of people are saying that they're not getting quality sleep or as much sleep as they would like. And even, earlier before this, when we had talked to our own community and our own population, it was much, much higher than that. It was like 75%. So we know that this is impacting people's sleep, which is also, a cycle of impacting their mental health, anxiety. And so, whether it's directly related to the pandemic or more broadly, recognizing sleep as wellness is just as valuable as a pillar as diet and nutrition and exercise. That for us, our products and our narrative and story and purpose were we were kind of there anyway. There's some really interesting trends that have to do with, circadian rhythm and thermal regulation. And I think, again, these sleep trends are rising to the surface because people are talking about what you can do to improve your sleep. So we obviously look at that as we talk about our own products. But yes, it's going to continue to affect that time at night where your brain is active and you can't fall asleep, and not just the pandemic, but multiple social issues. So we're certainly aware of how that's affecting our community, and making sure that we're a company that is responding to that and is empathetic to that, and also we have just great products that work for it. So certainly, yes, it's a huge trend, but it's also a trend outside of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I'm also just realizing we talked about, yesterday we were talking about how this is Sleep Week, right? And I'm also just reflecting that it seems a little unfair or maybe ironic, or maybe it was intentional, that Sleep Week is also the same week as daylight savings and that some of us lost an hour of sleep.
So it's funny, I thought about that during this, for what we did for our community is a couple of things. First of all, everyone started the day around noon. We just knew that the morning would be disrupted. And so we kind of made that accommodation. And then we also, our team created a great partnership with Bluestone, which is a coffee shop around the country. And we created a Casperino, which had really kind of, it was an energizing, but also calming energy. Combination of coffee with kind of wellness ingredients and elixirs. So we put that into the world. And then, in general, we've had a ton of sleep content. We develop about 225 minutes of sleep content, and have a lot of content and resources for our community and for everyone. And that's been on YouTube and Instagram and Spotify. So we are certainly, we celebrate it. And we also know that it's a time that people can indulge in a bit of self-care.
That is so nice. I would like to have been at
I
Casper
know.
Monday morning, but I'm thinking that you might have to bottle the Bluestone Zen coffee drink and get that out to all of us.
If we were all in person, that would be such an amazing, way to enjoy the trend watch, is having your Casper cappuccino.
Definitely. Yes. Okay. So we talked about trends in sleep industry. And then if we're to just step back more broadly, we talked about Casper being an innovator in the direct to consumer space. More broadly in D2C, are there any trends that you're super excited about, or any that are kind of fatiguing and you're ready to say goodbye to?
I think a lot of the trends have just benefited Casper in general, right? That there's a lot more shopping online, a lot more starting with search. So having a brand that has a high level of awareness is really helpful there. The migration from a lot of people in cities to the suburbs, and the investment in home, and the reality that our single rooms are playing multiple roles. I think is all, these are trends that are just outside sleep, but as a category of furniture or a category of home, it's really benefited. It's been a benefit to us as people really are looking at their holistic environments. It's very different to look at a single product like a mattress versus to look at, how do I create this environment that helps me feel calm, helps me feel relaxed, gives me a sense of sanctuary. And so, all of these kind of shifts have really played very well into, the fact that we are trying to deliver experiences. As I said earlier, we also have, a lot more kind of share-worthy content, and I had shared that around, sleep tips and what are people looking for in terms of guidance and advice. And then it's also helped us kind of really refine, our social strategies, and how are we engaging with different parts of our community as the products that we have are kind of becoming more relevant, like furniture. And so we kind of have found this to be an opportunity to work with different types of people that maybe we wouldn't have worked with, first and foremost, like in the interior design space. Now, there's a whole new opportunity and a whole new conversation around, creating that space. And so we've really connected with some of these incredible interior designers and influencers to help us show people how, we can create these spaces for them. So it's certainly, helped us to adapt. But as I said, we were pretty well positioned to respond to all these trends, and whether they were sleep related or whether they were, more generally related.
It's been a really interesting observation, just even people in my own circle spending more time and more investment on home improvement, because, we focus on our immediate environments and we're all at home. So what better time than to kind of look around us and, making improvements in our sleep environment as part of a much bigger home improvement scheme is definitely seems to be trending as a result of the pandemic. And then you had a great segue into a question I was going to ask you about social. And, if the other thing that we're doing, if we're not improving our homes, is spending more time on our screens, certainly more time with social media. And you touched on this a little bit, but anything else you'd share around just the marketing landscape more broadly, and the importance of social and the kind of shifting dynamics, taking advantage of social trends? You mentioned the use of influencers, like how Casper is thinking about their social media presence and how important that is to your marketing approach.
Outside of what I had said before, I think what I've noticed the most in terms of social is tonality and authenticity of engagement. And so when you saw and we experienced so much unrest in our world outside of the pandemic, across myriad social issues, we were really conscious, and probably more conscious than we had been in the past. We've always had a very optimistic brand. We've always had a very friendly and approachable tone. But I think it required us to be far more self-reflective and sensitive to make sure the tonality wasn't coming off in any way as insensitive, and to look at the fact that there's been such general consumer values shifts as a result of what's gone on, not just shifts in behavior, but deeper shifts in values. And so I thought this was kind of a very interesting, every year, I think for the past 10 years, one of the consumer values, the top value had been loyalty. And this is the first time in 10 years that had shifted to equality. And so when we started to talk about that as a team, we really were mindful of the fact that absolutely everybody sleeps. It seems like it's the most democratic thing in the world, but at the same time, it is a privilege. And we wanted to kind of approach that level of sensitivity that not everybody can sleep. Not everybody has the privilege of being relaxed at night. And it's not just, this is the product that will solve that. It's an understanding that there's a lot of differences in terms of how people are experiencing what's going on right now, and not to look at our tonality, our messaging as kind of a one size fits all, is to really be sensitive to that. So I think that's certainly something that we've leaned into and talked a lot about as a team.
Yeah, and that rings very true for Essence as well, and conversations that we had with clients, particularly early in the pandemic, about where and how it was appropriate to shift messaging to reflect that empathy, but also sustain a presence, which is important for brands as well, but just to make sure it's coming across in a way that resonates with people and the circumstances that they're facing.
Right, and I heard earlier in the conversation, we've always approached this through the lens of sleep. Right, we've approached issues through that lens because that's an authentic lane for us, and that's a real place for us, and that's where we can have a point of view and impact. And it's also knowing when it's not your place, and where you don't want to be perceived as just getting in on any conversation. And so we've also been very mindful of that, to making sure that when we are engaging, we're engaging through the lens that we feel the most passionate about and where we can offer the most value.
And that's great. It's a very intentional strategy. And
absolutely
rings true with your audience.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your role as a CMO, and I think that a CMO is such a dynamic role in a corporate infrastructure and leadership structure, and CMOs are very different from organization to organization too. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about, from your perspective, what you care about as a CMO in thinking about Casper, and what challenges does a contemporary CMO like yourself face? And I guess despite creating the perfect sleep environment, what keeps you up at night, Lisa?
Again, I because I didn't start out thinking I was going to be a CMO, I'd always kind of approached everything with a, and this is still to this day, a learning mindset. There's so much change in the marketing landscape over the last, what we're facing even in a month or so with iOS 14. I mean, every single moment, whether it's because of the industry or because of the environment or because of the marketing landscape, there's so much change. And so you can't really approach your role as a singular entity. It's requiring so many of us to know how to balance data and also how to balance intuition and apply experience, and having this kind of cocktail, this combination, I think is critical. I think it's funny when I look at marketing also holds so many different roles in different types of organizations. So while you could be a marketer in a marketing and brand-led company, you can also be a marketer in a product-led company, or a marketer in a merchant-led company, or a marketer in a design-led company. And those are all different types of marketers. And so I think it's also, behooved me to be able to recognize how my role played in an organization. So by the time by the time I am a CMO, I've actually drawn upon a lot of those different perspectives of being a marketer where marketing counted more than anything, as opposed to being a marketer when it was a support function. So it's recognizing that trajectory of what role does marketing play in your organization, and then, the connection to the insights, the connection to the consumer and the data. Everybody knows this has to be paramount in terms of decision making, but not at the service of intuition also. I mean, not at the detriment to your own gut and your own sense of knowing your community and being human. And so, I still go back to whether it's the company or it's your career, that level of authenticity and consistency to who you are really needs to be there. I think people who worked for me and in my department 20 years ago versus today would probably say at my core are, is the same person. And so I think that is one of as times change and everything is so dynamic and disruptive, you being a beacon of authenticity and stability is really, really important. And then yet just recognizing that there's a lot of elements that are unprecedented and not everything is going to be preparable, and that's okay. And it's okay to trial and learn, and that's okay to fail and just fail fast and move on. But just also being recognizing that that's part of the job is to experiment and to try things and to make sure you understand why it's working and not. And then obviously the last thing that I think is the most critical is just the connection to your consumer. I don't think that's ever changed. I love the level of insights we get when we go, like you said, we go into consumers' bedrooms. We understand what their kids' rooms looks like. We're hearing what's troubling them. And so when you said kind of what keeps me up at night is not being able to help them and not being able to find those solutions for them, or that intention not being, clear. And so I, as a storyteller, as a natural storyteller, it's, that's our job to make sure that we communicate to people that we understand and we are there and we have a solution and we have a level of availability and a level of authenticity. And so, it's kind of a combination of multiple different elements of your role. And I'm sure like myself, you own multiple departments, and knowing how to deal with those different departments is very different. I have the creative team and I have the data team. They don't speak the same language all the time. And so you also have to be able to have that level of fluency. So it's the most, I'd say one of the most rewarding roles in an organization, because it influences so much of what people experience, and you are, fundamentally connected to that human experience.
Yeah, that's really beautifully articulated, kind of that constant juggling act of trying to be authentic, but making decisions heavily based in data, and then trying to trust your intuition and take into account, unprecedented factors in our environment. I think it's a good thing that you have a good sleep situation, because it sounds like you're firing on all pistons during the day and making a lot of challenging decisions. I think we have just a little bit of time left, so I wanted to ask you a question, something that I'm personally really passionate about. March is International Women's Month, and this year's theme is Choose to Challenge. The theme is really asking women and allies of gender equity to challenge some of the societal norms or misconceptions about women. I'd love to hear if Casper is doing anything in recognition of this month.
We are, and part of what we are doing is talking to women across all levels of the organization, and based on that theme, having them share their story. And so it's giving visibility and the spotlight to, again, someone's personal experience. And so that's going to be a series of conversations that we're doing across the organization. We're also having panelists from external companies that have kind of embodied, a level of success through authenticity, and talking to them and hearing their experience. And, I think it also, celebrating our own community. I'm very, very fortunate to work for, alongside, and have around me a lot of incredibly strong and successful women. Our president and chief commercial officer, our VP head of brand, our VP head of e-com, our VP head of performance, our head of PR. These are all women, and so we are, you know, I feel very, very lucky to have that, and our chief people and diversity officer, you know, have that as part of my direct community. So we're celebrating it, and we're also, you know, really recognizing that we're very fortunate to have our own network within each other that we can talk to and mentor, and I also do that personally on the side as mentor individuals. So we are celebrating it, and it's definitely something important to our community and our company.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a great opportunity for folks at Casper. And yeah, I love hearing that the focus is internal, but also bringing in external perspectives too. I see Izzy's joined us, and we're almost at our time. We talked about Sleep Week and International Women's Month. So just really quickly, Lisa, I wanted to end on tomorrow is World Sleep Day. So there's actually a day within this week of celebration as well. Anything you want to leave us with that we should know about World Sleep Day and how we might celebrate?
Well, I mean, honestly, at the most macro level, you know, first of all, thank you for having me here. This has been fantastic. And you know, in celebration of the sleep day, we're obviously encouraging people to get as much rest as they can. I know that sounds very simple, but if you can do something for yourself, give yourself that hour, give yourself that time, give yourself that permission to try and wind down and focus on your own time in your own moment, because this is, you know, we are heading into spring. We are heading into, you know, hopefully a better future. And so, you know, get the rest you need tonight so you can have a much better tomorrow. That's what I can share.
I love that. Lisa, clearly a key part of cementing Casper, cementing sleep as a major pillar of wellness. Thank you so much for sharing everything from your quirky facts to what Casper is up to with us. And thank you, Izzy, and the Brand Innovators for having us today.
Thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Lisa and Jill. I loved hearing about all the recent trends in the sleep industry and how Casper has stepped up and been involved, especially with the Casper Chino, I believe it was called.
Yes.
Which I wish I had the chance to try, but you know, it's just interesting to think about the importance of how home life has really become such